Right, UFC Fight Night. Rose Namajunas versus Tracy Cortez. Can we just scrap these type of main events? Because you'll notice that it's rare that a women's main event will ever get fight of the night. Please tell me when one has. I can't remember. But anyways, Tracy Cortez against Rose Namajunas. Namajunas is a levels above Tracy Cortez. Tracy Cortez can't get into rhythm. Okay, it was on short notice, and people want to say about that. Even if she had a full training camp, she wouldn't beat Rose Namajunas. She ain't that level yet. Like, she struggled against Jasmine Judovicus, which in my opinion is not bad, considering how good she actually is. Trains at elevation, good grappling. She can defend takedowns, and her striking on the feet was actually all right. And I'm talking about for women's standard. I'm not comparing it to the men, because obviously that would just be dumbfounded, as some people would say. But yeah, Tracy Cortez is meant to be the better grappler. It didn't look like it in the fight. It looked like Rose Namajunas was in no trouble at any point in the fight. It was able to pretty much lock up a wizard, back her up into the cage, and then take her back and swing her down to the ground like she's going for a lateral drop, but from the back. Or it might be a different type of takedown. But anyways, it was not good. And I'm hearing some people saying that she had like a fake eyelash in there. I don't know. I'm not a beautician, but if she has, it just sums up the performance for you. You just weren't great. Like, the thing's falling off, allegedly. And not only that, her striking is not that good. She looked better in the Jasmine fight with her striking. And obviously you will say that Rose Namajunas is a top-level striker compared to a person like Tracy Cortez. And look at the people she just came up against. Like, she knocked out Weili Zhang, which I, to this day, still can't believe happened. But to me, Tracy Cortez, she needs to be fighting much lower down. Like, even a non-ranked opponent wouldn't be bad, but obviously you'll give her a ranked opponent. But for Rose Namajunas, the type of fight I want to see is in Erin Blanchfield. I know they said about Macy Barber before. Erin Blanchfield, coming off a loss to Manon Fiorot, that would be interesting, because that's a fight where she isn't going to be the person who can do what she does with the grappling, where even though her wrestling's improved, you're not taking down someone like Erin Blanchfield, because that's all she wants to do, is be in your face and shoot constantly. Colby levels of cardio. So yeah, I don't have many positive things to say about this main event. That's just the way I feel about it. But anyway, it was the next fight. And then here we have the next fight with Muslim Salikhov versus Santiago Ponzinibbio, the pensioner fight. It made no sense. Again, another one where the top two fights on the card in terms of where they were placed should be on the prelims. But anyways, was it a robbery? To me, it looked like it. But when I've watched a bit of it back now, it probably wasn't. And I think the reason why Santiago has ended up bottling the fight is because of this stupid grappling of hugging against the cage. Or, you know, in round 3 when he got the takedown, he didn't do anything with it. It was just pretty much maintaining control. And with the maintaining control, remember Holly Holm, I think when she fought Caitlin Vieira, cage stalling. That's kind of what Ponzinibbio was doing. Or you might say he weren't, because he was throwing those like light strikes to the body. But it was very like, there was nothing in it. It was very dry. It was very painful to watch. And not only that, Santiago Ponzinibbio, his jab wasn't there. We were seeing Salikhov pretty much trying to do what Kevin Holland did. And it was working. It was landing at times. Trying to find that left hook towards the chin of Santiago Ponzinibbio. And when Santiago Ponzinibbio was striking, some of the shots looked like they were hitting the shoulders. He wasn't really hitting Salikhov clean. That's probably why, to the judges, they gave it to Salikhov, because when Salikhov was throwing, they would land clean. But if Santiago landed like one heavy strike out of like a bunch of strikes that didn't land, that might have favoured the judges to give him one of the rounds. But to me, it looked like a robbery, but if you go back and watch it again, you'll see that if you actually base it round by round, Salikhov has got a good argument of winning it. And it sounds stupid because it doesn't look like he does when you watch it live. But if you go back and watch it again, trust me, do it. Well, no, don't do it because you won't enjoy it. But I'm just saying for anyone who actually does want to watch it again, which probably wouldn't advise you to. It's more competitive than you think, but I would have given it to Ponzinibbio. But I'm just giving you the judge's point of view and what I saw from watching it on how you could give it to Salikhov. But for me, Ponzinibbio, even though some of the strikes were missing, it was that one heavy strike that would get through, which, like I said, would favour to the judges in the one that actually gave him the win compared to the other two who didn't. And that's the type of category I'm in. So for both of the fighters, I can't recommend you a fight for both of them because both of them should be retired. Honestly. And then we have Drew Dober versus Gene Silva, which arguably fight of the night. And I just checked now and they did give it fight of the night. And what I liked about Gene Silva, I have no idea why I picked Drew Dober. But what I liked about Gene Silva, it's the countering. He looks so fast. Like when he throws that counter strike, you can't see it coming because as soon as you blink, and I'm not just exaggerating, he's thrown 2 strikes and you haven't even seen it. And Drew Dober's that kind of like blocky striker where he plants his feet into the ground and then looks to throw a punch instead of like using feints to draw you in. And Silva usually does do that, but in this fight here, all he had to do is wait for Drew Dober to try and rush in and put his full body weight onto that one leg and then look to check hook him or look to throw the lead elbow. Or when he noticed that Drew Dober was overcommitting, not throwing one strike, but he's following through and going to throw the other whilst planting both of his feet in the ground, not being loose on the feet, he's able to time that spinning elbow. And that's one thing I've noticed about Gene Silva. He has a very good fight IQ. Like, look at the people who have crumbled when Drew Dober put the pressure on him. And I thought he would have, which is why I picked Dober. But then when I use the logic, Silva should win. The age, less damage, on a good win streak. He ain't coming off a loss like Drew Dober. And there's that winning percentage. I believe it's around 60 to 70% when there's like a 11-year edge or an 8-year edge on your opponent. And all of those factors, I did not put it into account. And I'll tell you why, because look at the Jasmine Judovikas fight. That method wouldn't have worked. But anyways, Gene Silva, I think he should stay at featherweight. Lightweight, if you want to fight in lightweight, you've got really hard competition. Featherweight, he can make his way into the rankings easy. If you fought like an Alex Caceres, that's an easy top 15 ranking. Or, if the UFC wanted to be clever, I don't think they'd do it because it would be a very bad matchup for him. But what if they gave him a Sean Woodson? Now, that wouldn't be fair because he wants to fight lower down now because he's had the fair share of fights. But Steve Garcia, if he hasn't got a fight booked, would be interesting. Both 2 power merchants. But the IQ's on Silva's side, so he'll be able to counter him. But then again, he's going to be more fluid than Drew Dober, who's more of a stocky. He isn't like crisp. He's just very clunky, but he's like a tank, like the way he's built. And when he touches you, people crumble. So for Drew Dober, he's getting old now. And it's starting to get a bit hard to think of opponents who he could fight. But you know what? They should do a fight with him and Drakkar Klose. That would be an interesting fight. Right, Bonfim versus Angel Loosa. Right, even though Bonfim is an alright fighter, he has actually been exposed for what he actually is. He's no longer this top 15 ranked guy. Like, there were talks about him after he was getting all of these guillotines and winning by that same submission, that he's probably going to be a top 15 fighter. And then when he fought Nicolas Dalby, people are starting to question, are you a fraud? And then he comes up against Angel Loosa, and this is the key determining factor on whether I believed he could become a top 15. And he struggled earlier on, which isn't bad because it's a fight, and obviously it doesn't always end up like a 30-27 fight. But there were small things I noticed from him. His wrestling is not good. It's really not. Like defensive grappling, nah. The only good thing he's good at is holding onto a guillotine. But it didn't work tonight, jumping onto guillotine. So that method that's been working the whole time, like his Kron Gracie, but obviously better than that, it does not work against guys who know how to defend against it and don't have low IQ, which Loosa, his fighting style, it's not low IQ. It's just he's a big ball of muscle who has no cardio in the third round. So he can give you everything in the first round. And they're in elevation. So in the second round, output stopping, struggling to get the takedowns, is pretty much shooting out of range and just gassing himself out more by going for takedowns and failing. He just looked washed up, and I've never rated Loosa. Like, he had that one good moment against Jack Maddalena, but that's about it. What else has this guy done? Nothing. And what did he do today? Look rubbish, because all he does is shoot onto people, hug them, and his boxing, he's meant to be the better striker than Bonfim. Clearly not. Bonfim was piecing him up with a basic jab, and Loosa looked like a fish out of water, did not know what to do. He didn't even make any adjustments, like moving his head off the centre line and then looking to throw a punch off that. He didn't look at adapting and looking to work the clinch into a takedown. He just stuck to, I'm not going to throw a punch anymore. I'm just going to let you just box the head off me and just accept I'm going to lose, because that's what it felt like after the first round. Because he was eating knees in the clinch to the body. Like, Bonfim's striking, Thai striking, looks good, clinch work. But when you're talking about out-of-range boxing, nothing special about just throwing a few jabs and then landing maybe like a body shot and then landing an uppercut. He didn't look like a really good striker. It looked a bit sloppy, but then I can say the elevation might have been a problem. But to me, that was the concluding factor to whether I thought he could go really far. And I'm starting to think, no, he couldn't. Maybe he'll be like a good name, but I don't know if I can see him being a top 15 in welterweight as well. When you look at the people who are in it, like number 15, I believe Rinat was near that number. And Bonfim would not be able to beat a Rinat. Actually, you know what? Saying that, that's the type of fight I want to see next. Bonfim Rinat. Because I think boxing-wise, he ain't outstriking Rinat. He'll get KO'd if he just decides to stand on the feet. But then, I think where it becomes a good matchup is Rinat is always shooting him for double legs. I know jumping onto the guillotine doesn't always work, but if you have a guy who's constantly shooting on those doubles and you're constantly going for that jumping guillotine, it will be only a matter of time where Rinat goes for like a double leg, but leaves his head a bit too exposed. And then that one time, he's able to jump onto that guillotine, and that's why I'm saying that would be an interesting fight. But I believe he wants to fight lower down. But if he wants to have a fight a bit higher up, take that, because arguably you could ask that he lost to Nicholas Selby, but because he got the win on his record, he's going to be entitled to want to fight higher up compared to fighting lower down. But yeah, Angel Loosa, just cut the guy. I'm sorry, I'm done with him. He's just not UFC level. He was a one-round fighter, and after round one, he does nothing. Right, Christian Rodriguez versus Julian Erosa. Julian Erosa, I'd like to call him underrated, but I can't. The correct word to use would be inconsistent. This guy can beat very good fighters on his day, but then have stupid losses, all because of his chin. And I feel bad for fighters who have bad chins, because if you have a bad chin, there's not really much you can do about it. And well, you could say you train your neck, but that can't, like, always treat an already compromised chin, which is what he's got. But if you actually go back and look at the wins he's got now, look at the wins he's got in his record. Christian Rodriguez, a guy who people were saying was a prospect. I know it was a robbery with Isaac Dulgarian, but he made it competitive in that fight when he was starting to slow down. He only lost to Jonathan Pierce. He beat Simon. He beat Roy Rosas Jr. And then you've got Julian Erosa going out there and actually making it competitive with the striking. Like, Rodriguez struggled early because you were seeing that Erosa was good with rolling with the punches and landing that front kick. And he hasn't got like these basic striking combinations where he throws a 1-2. He'll mix up like an uppercut followed by like either a hook or just combinations that aren't just basic ones that you would see someone like Darren Till do. Like beating people like Charles Jourdain, Nate Landwehr, Sean Woodson, like them wins are aging well. Jamal Emmers, and arguably he should have beaten Paddy Pimblett. Go ahead and watch it. it was a robbery because Paddy Pimblett's grappling was not effective enough, yet they gave him the win. But then, like I said, he'll win. Well, he didn't win that fight, but he should have. Like, he wins fights that you would think on paper he wouldn't. But then you go and see he loses to Artem Lobov by KO in the first round. Like, that guy's a bum now. And I know it was years ago, so you might say he weren't a bum then. But even then, he was trash overall. And you got like people like Grant Dawson's not a bad loss. The Julian Arce's are not a bad loss. Devontae Smith, debatable. It really is. And like Alex Caceres getting knocked out of, like, he is so inconsistent. You tap him with the right punch on the chin. And Alex Caceres ain't a knockout artist, which confused me even more. But yeah, Julian Erosa's at a point in his career where he pretty much needs to have entertaining matchups, because I can somehow seeing him fluke his way into a top 15. He really could. So the type of fight I want to see with him is, but I've got to be careful because of his chin. Maybe, and I'll say maybe about this, a Yusuf Zalal. That would be an interesting fight. Not a guy with a serious amount of power, but a guy with a very good bottom game. No, not a bottom game, a top game, and you know what I'm on about. So that would be a good fight. I was looking at giving him a ranked opponent in a guy like Dan Ige or a Bryce Mitchell, but no. That will just not end well. So we need to build him up a little bit again. Give him that fight. If he wins that, then we can start looking at top 15. But he's now got some good wins under his record, like the last two. Ricardo Ramos, Rodriguez, both by guillotine as well. And he has got underrated jiu-jitsu. His jiu-jitsu's up there in the UFC. It really is. Like, the way, as soon as he just locks it in and gets that grip or squeeze, people immediately tap. It's not one where they get into the choke and you have to wait a while for it. Guillotines are not a choke a lot of people want to tap out to. A lot of people can get their way out of it. But he's one of those guys, because of his jiu-jitsu so good, he's able to get these blood chokes on the opponents that just makes people tap out. So yeah, I'd want to see that. And for Christian Rodriguez, back to bantamweight. I don't know what he's doing coming up to featherweight. It's just not for him, in my opinion. He does way better at bantamweight. And I think a good fight for Christian Rodriguez would be an Ayman Zahabi. I'd want to see that type of fight. Right, we'll go over it quick. Abdul Razak Alhassan versus Cody Brundage. I'm sick and tired of this Brundage guy, man. Just cut him already. I know you'll be like, oh, it was a disqualification. He's lucky. Yeah, he was lucky it weren't a disqualification. But it seems like Brundage is like stealing a living in the UFC, finding ways to survive, or if he isn't finding ways to survive, he's finding ways to put himself in positions where he can get a disqualification win. And as soon as he's like hurt or gets hit with a strike that's considered illegal, he will just milk all the time out. Like, if you're going to call Aljamain Sterling like an actor, Brundage is. And okay, he landed loads and loads of strikes. And if you've got Alhassan of all people hammering down on the back of your head, of course, that's bad. But it's not the first time. You have Mal Cowan, who that fight had to get stopped because of back of the head punches. And at this point, I'm starting to question the heart of this guy. Like, this guy, he's just out there just to get his paycheck pretty much. Like, he doesn't care about winning, it seems like. He allows himself to lose. He fights in a way that he just doesn't want to get knocked out badly. Like, he's scared of his opponent. Because when he shoots him for the legs, he gets hit with these illegal strikes, but he doesn't take the time out and say, I'm ready to go back in. And people say because he's maybe concussed, which is a fair point to make. But when it happens more than once, I'm starting to question him. And Brundage was hoping, he was begging that he gets that disqualification win, because if he gets that win, he's now had 2 DQ wins, and his record looks better than it actually is, when it shouldn't be. Like, a lot of fights he's had, he was a little dreadful. The Zach race was a fluke. But he's just one of those guys who's absolutely stealing a living, and that's all I've got to say about him. So the fight to make is a rematch between the two. I look like a mug now, because on the predictions, I really thought this guy would 30-27 Charles Johnson, for him then to get uppercutted, knocked out cold in the 3rd round. Do you know how painful that is? And I feel for anyone who actually put real money on that guy, because He started off the round kind of slow, which is what I expected. But then he grows into the fight like round 2. But so does Charles Johnson. And what does he do? He's backing up, he's shelling up, and allowing Joshua Van to fire off multiple combinations. But when he does that, he leaves himself very open. And again, Van is only 22. And he leaves himself open on the feet when he strikes. Because when you pressure heavy, you'll notice that fighters who do that end up taking a lot of damage. Or not always a lot of damage, but eat a lot of punches. And Joshua Van has been dropped before. If you go back and look at the fight of Kevin Borges, he got dropped in that fight. He didn't go flat on his back, but he got sat down. You know, a bit like how Holloway got sat down by Gaethje. That type of knockdown. That happened with Van. And in this fight here, the third round, he comes out way too aggressive and then opens himself up for that uppercut and just gets flatlined. I couldn't believe what I was seeing because I thought Van, a lot of people were calling him a lock, which on paper he obviously isn't. Any guy who fights Charles Johnson, you can't call a lock because the amount of times this guy's being underrated in fights, being an underdog and then winning, I believe that's like 3 times now he has been an underdog and he's ended up winning. I believe Jake Hadley was near even, but Azat Maxim, underdog. Hadley, near even. Van, underdog. And he's won all 3. Like, I was starting to think this guy is washed up. Like, look at them fights with Odi Osborne, that was embarrassing. Cody Durden, fair enough. Estevam, he had nothing. And now look at this comeback with decent names. Azat Maxim, we don't know too much about him, apart from the fact that he was undefeated. And you could argue he lost to Tyson Nam, but it's still a good win to have in your record. And the Jake Hadley and Van, they're very good wins. That's going to keep him in the UFC for another year minimum. Like, he's getting a new contract based off them 3 wins as well. And especially now you got an uppercut over a prospect like Van. Yeah, he's getting a new contract. Who do I want to see him fight next? In my opinion, I want to see him fight Asuma Jiri at flyweight. But because he ain't ranked, I don't think they'll look at doing that. I can see them now doing, if you really want to get him ranked easily, feed him Matt Chanel, because Matt Chanel's a glass jaw. He will end up the same way, and then Charles Johnson will get an easy flyweight ranking. Or if they really want to push him, give him a David Dorak or a Tagir Ulanbekov. Now, I believe Ulanbekov's got a fight, but give him a David Dorak. But I doubt they'll do that. But they're the type of fights I'd want to see. But for the guy who got brutally knocked out in Joshua Van, he's going to have to take a while out now. So he's going to be sitting out for a bit. So who would I like to see him fight? Flyweight's so small, it's actually hard to pick of an opponent. If I had to pick one, a Nathan Menes. I know you might find it a bit boring, but flyweight is the division which it's improving, don't get me wrong. But it's not always the most entertaining. It's not like a lot of knockouts and stuff like that. So a Nathan Menes, maybe you could do. But because he's coming off a loss, like a knockout one, Nate Menes is on a 2-fight winning streak. I feel like they want to match him with someone who's on a loss as well. So maybe an Odi Osborne I can see the UFC giving him. Brutal. Montel Jackson versus Blackshear. The fact that this guy has been out for a year and in 18 seconds has already knocked out Damon Blackshear, who's known for having an alright chin and not getting knocked out, gets flattened, out cold, ironed out with a straight left. It isn't even a punch that's like using all of his hip, using all of that like leg drive. He's thrown a straight punch, but probably because of the momentum of going into it as well, that's caused the knockout. But that's impressive to me because he was near even. It was at 2 odds. And Damon Blackshear was like near even as well. So it was one of those weird fights where the amount of value you could have gotten him, like imagine just whacking the house on Montel Jackson. Obviously you wouldn't, but to me that just seemed like a fight where Damon Blackshear's out of his depth. Montel Jackson is very technical on the feet. But when you pair the power with the technicality, that's what makes me believe he can be a top 15 fighter. And that's why I still think he will be. But after that win, he's probably going to get a good push. Like, he isn't fighting no bum after that. Damon Blackshear, I will repeat it again. is a good win on your record. So for Montel Jackson, the type of fight I'd want to see with him is a Saeed Nurmagomedov. I think he would be an interesting fight because he will force the grappling exchanges. Or, if you want to... I was going to say Cody Garbrandt, but he's got no chin. So, yeah, we'll do Saeed Nurmagomedov. Or, what about Kyler Phillips. Pedro Munoz. I can see them doing something like that. Like, he can get a push because he was already that guy before. But he was just out for a while, and now he's back. He irons out Damon Blackshear, who looked really good recently. And they're the type of fights you want to see. Of Saeed Nurmagomedov or Pedro Munoz, or maybe even a Chris Gutierrez. And for Damon Blackshear, he's going to have to go to fight in these low-ranked fighters again. I wouldn't be surprised if they're like, we want to get the guy's confidence back. Let's just feed him to a Rani Yahya, where he can outstrike him, but then he has to be wary about getting taken down. Andre Petroski versus Josh Fremd. Petroski looked elite out there today. Like, that grappling of his, manhandle him. Yeah, it might not have all been a 10-8 because there wasn't that much damage, but it was the control time. It was like watching a Fury grappling, and not Tyson Fury. You know, like one of those pro Fury competitions, the grappling ones. It was like that. Josh Fremd, even though he was doing a good job of like moving when he was on his back, not allowing himself to just stay in one position, he looked like a fish out of water again. He didn't know what to do. He was just moving all around the place, but then making himself tired from like using all that energy, and having Andre Petroski, who's like a big guy, on top of him. He didn't land that many strikes, but he'd land like a small punch and just keep being active on the ground with him. He wasn't just lying down on top of him. He was lying on him whilst moving around, making it really uncomfortable for him. So for me, that is a very good win. Like, in terms of performance-wise, like, he was always better than Fremd. Fremd is quite a basic fighter, but Petroski's got a lot of good things in his game, like his wrestling with the jiu-jitsu as well. But his chin lets him down. Like, getting knocked down by shooting for a takedown is just embarrassing. But he embarrassed Josh Fremd out there. And for Petroski, I'm kind of wary of the fights we do. But I'm at the point with Paul Craig, would he do it? Paul Craig, Andre Petroski would be an interesting fight. Because Petroski doesn't like to strike. Even against like a jiu-jitsu guy in Jared Meerschaert, whose striking has been alright at times, but he's inconsistent with striking. He might look to do that, or he might look to get that early takedown, but then he has to worry about the extreme threat of him on the ground in Paul Craig. But I doubt they'll do it. But for Josh Fremd, again, we're looking at another unranked fighter for him. Evan Elder versus Darius Flowers. Oh my God, what an embarrassing performance by Darius Flowers. Good submission by Elder, but Darius Flowers quit. He was throwing himself on the floor when he couldn't get the takedowns. He wasn't even pulling guard because he wasn't bringing him in with the butterfly. He wasn't pulling him down. He was just throwing his body on the floor, probably trying to get a breather because he struggles with the elevation, and then pretty much doing nothing off his back and just accepting that he's been cooked. And on the feet, again, Passion Merchant, taunting, wiggling his finger, I believe he was doing. I can't even remember. And just embarrassing himself and making himself look like a fool. And then getting thrashed because of that. Because he likes to show off, and then that's going to drain him from doing all the taunts and then overthrown. Like, he can do everything in the first round, go all out and be aggressive. But as soon as that second round hits, he will crumble. And then you got a guy like Evan Elder, who's more of like a grinder or a grifter, where if it gets tough, he'll push through it. Like, he didn't want to stop that fight of Nazim Salikhov when he had that cut, but he was forced to. And I believe he can go quite far, but I don't know about ranked yet. But he looks really interesting with his striking and the kicks, because Darius Flowers landed like a few, but you're in a fight, so of course you're going to like get hit with a shot. But he looked really, really, really good out there. And Darius Flowers looked like a guy who had never fought in his life and was just going out there like he's come back from the pub looking for a fight. It was embarrassing to watch by Flowers. But anyways, Evan Elder, very good win. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.